Welcome to another episode of Parenting Not What You Thought podcast, where we delve into the depths of parenting in ways that you might never have thought of before. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Welcome back to another episode of Parenting Not What You Thought. We are honored to have with us the renowned author, Mrs. Bracha Goetz. Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Please, can you tell our listeners a little bit about you?
Sure. I'm the author of 43 picture books for
Wow.
young children. What they all have in common is that they help children's souls to shine. And every single one of them in a different way, helps to instill gratitude in very young children.
Yeah, that's very interesting because you're saying you're not just writing a book to make it happy and pleasurable, but there's a reason, there's something that we're trying to impart, there's a lesson here that the children are going to learn. And actually, I was flipping through some of your titles in preparation for this interview, and I was surprised at how many of them I knew. And I noticed a theme that they're all there for a purpose. They're there for healthy living. They're there for, to be able to teach a child that it's okay if their mother says no, with your latest book that I'm a big fan of. And, a lot of Yom Tif and Jewish type of ideals. So it's interesting because there are books now that have like Hechsherim. And there are people that talk about this a lot, that you could have a very fine person writing a very fine book. And you might think, like, who cares who the author really is, if it's just a novel, if it's just nothing. But there are messages that come through. Now, you're trying to overtly give over a message to young children. What do you feel about parents screening the books that they're reading to their children to make sure that the messaging comes through as we would want them for our children?
It's essential to screen books before giving them to young children. Absolutely essential. Like secular books, they could seem innocent, but they have values that are really detrimental. One famous example are the Berenstain Bears, where the father bear is put down all the time, not giving any cover, and he's really looked down upon in the book and not given respect. So we have to be really careful with the books our children see. In one of my books, Let's Stay Pure, I talk about, if we're careful about what children eat, we're also consuming literature. A child is consuming literature. It nourishes their soul. We have to be so careful what we put inside our children because it has a huge effect. And that's why I write children's books, because I know you can have a huge effect on very young children for the rest of their lives. If they gain certain skills as young children, then it becomes a part of them. It becomes integrated, and they can have so much more joy for the rest of their lives.
And that's amazing, because the secular world also pushes reading for young children because it promotes literacy and it gets them to learn how to read, even if they're not at the reading level age yet. But years ago, someone had actually pointed out to me what you just mentioned about the Bernstein Bears, how the father is the loser, so to
Yes.
speak, in the book. Every single book that they have.
Yeah.
Person also pointed out to me that Curious George tells a story about a monkey who's always doing the wrong thing, but because he's cute, he gets away with it. And there's a lot of messaging that goes into what to us were childhood classics. So that's something. But what about the literacy level itself? So how does reading books to them? Obviously, it has to be a book that gives over a good message. But what about promoting the literacy itself? How does reading books help them to do that?
Yes, because children, when parents read books to young children, they associate reading with a cuddly, cozy time when they're sitting together and interacting. It's a very loving experience. Um, some of my books, like the safety books that I wrote, that those were big breakthrough books. Let's Stay Safe, and I'm talking about personal privacy. Parents have a hard time bringing up difficult subjects. These books pave the way to be able to do it in a cozy, calm, delightful way. It's really funny to me, but many children have told me that the Let's Stay Safe book is one of their favorite books, which I never expected. I expected it to be for parents to love it. But the children, they they first of all, they love the happy pictures, outstanding illustrations, but they love having guidelines in life. It actually makes them feel safer, not restricted. They love knowing what to do. Um, there's another book I wrote, Let's Appreciate Everyone, which explains how to better interact with children that have disabilities, because children with disabilities are usually the loneliest children around. They don't get invited to parties and play dates as much. So it gives young children who are not as neurodiverse, it gives them guidelines about how to interact. The reason they're not interacting is just because they don't know. Nobody ever explained to them, as with the safety books, how to interact. So children are hungry for these kind of guidelines, and they're really very grateful to get the guidelines in a
It's
book.
so true that when a child will feel safe and secure if if they have those boundaries, if the parents are the ones in charge of them. A lot of times the reason why they insist on doing things their way is because they really want the parents to not allow them to do it their way so that they can feel secure in the parents' presence. And
Yes,
your books are and again, we're not that's I mean, obviously you have a tremendous amount of phenomenal books out there that impart great lessons, but it's any good author that's giving over good lessons that are those books are part and essential of the child getting these type of boundaries. So in promoting the literacy itself, the fact that it giving a good association, a cozy association is very good. What about, like, I'll tell you, let's say I have my 2-year-old and my 4-year-old. Obviously, the older kids, they'll sit on the couch themselves. They'll curl up with a good book, right? So we can say that that's from when they were younger. They already associated that cozy feeling with reading. Then you have a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old who has Mommy read him the book already 5 times, and now he picks up the book and he says, "I'm going to read the book," and he opens up to the first page and he knows it, and he starts saying it. Is that beneficial for their development? What does that do for them?
totally. They have so much confidence. They own the book. They are empowered to read the books themselves because they've actually memorized it. They know what the book is all about and it becomes theirs. Which that's what's so awesome about books. When the parent begins by interacting with the child reading the book, and they could have discussions about the pages, like the newest book. I just got this one. The mother who always said yes. As you're reading it, you're looking at the pictures and you're discussing it with the child. Oh my goodness, look what's going on! Because the illustrator Leah Crone puts so many great details in that the child has a blast. Like really getting into the pictures. And once they've read it a few times with the parents, they're reading it themselves, they're going over it again, they're reviewing it. That's what's so amazing about children's books, that it's not a one-time thing. When you have the books in your home, you're the children are constantly, not constantly, but many times reviewing and reviewing. So it becomes a deep part of them, just like
Right,
the songs they learn in kindergarten, they stay with them for life because
right.
the things that we learn
That-
joyfully are the things that make the deepest impression. That's how we form habits, through joyful learning.
That's very true. Your latest book that you just picked up now is something that I have in my house. We got it as a gift. and I thought it was absolute genius the way that you didn't actually tell the child that it's good for the mother to say no, but you sort of let him come to his own conclusions. Because whoever didn't see the book, basically, the book is written as a child imagining that when she becomes a mother, she's always going to say yes. We've all had these dreams. And then the pictures show how that's not a very good ending to the story. So I know
Exactly.
kids that actually you hit them at the end of the book. It doesn't end if it's good or not, and you'll ask the children. So should the mother say yes or no? And they'll say no. That I wouldn't want my mother to always say yes. So
Exactly.
that's amazing. That's direct learning. What about most books? Now this is the difference between let's say myself and my wife, when we read the books to the kids, but she's much more interactive with the book with the child, and she'll point out the pictures and say, "Look, here's the challah, here's the this," and they get very involved in the whole experience. And I'm more like, "Okay, let's just read the book and it will be done." And well, so you're saying that the interactive experience with the pictures is part of helping the child like feel that this is part of of him, of who he is, right?
Exactly. And what's so amazing is that people don't realize that picture books, children's books, are get the message through to every single age level. The youngest children are reading the books. Parents are reading the books to the children. It could be grandparents reading the books to the children, and teenagers. Teenagers will pick up the books when no one's around, and they will read them too. So it's the only type of book that reaches every single age level, which is amazing. It's such an effective way to get messages across. Now, like you said, this book is very unusual. I wrote it because about a year and a half ago, one of my granddaughters, I was hanging out with her, and she said to me, her mother had just said no to her. She couldn't have candy. And she says to me, "When I'm a mother, I'm going to always say yes. I'm going to give my children candy whenever they want." So Hashem made this light bulb go off in my head, and I go, "Oh my goodness, this has got to be a book, you know? This, let's let
That's
that
amazing.
fantasy, yeah, let the fantasy come to life. Let's see, let the children actually experience what it would be like if they had a mother who always said yes." And you see in the pictures that things get increasingly more and more chaotic and awful. And the children that I've asked, they all say the same thing. "Oh no, I don't want a mother that always says yeah." After they've read the book, they get it. And I don't
Right,
think they never got it before, which is so awesome. They
right.
totally get the message. But
Right. I actually, when I work with parents, I also work with kids themselves in school, and there are a lot of children that I'll walk them through, for example, why there needs to be an authority in school, let's say, and why there needs to be, rules need to be followed, and we can't just do whatever every child wants. Now, I'll give them an example of a camp because a camp is easier for them to hear, and show them how everything would just be dysfunctional if
yes,
even in the moment it might be right or might seem right, but if you don't follow the rules and the structure, everything's just going to fall apart. So there are a lot of children that don't get this at all, and I have to sit there and explain it to them from the beginning, build ground up, that such a thing is important. And that's amazing that you're like really cutting through the noise and getting through to it with these books. So let me ask you, you keep on reiterating this idea that the book is the best teacher. Like it makes teaching very easy. It makes it very happy, which is very good, and it teaches all levels. What about a book that doesn't overtly teach? It just now in the Jewish world, Hashem, most books do because the author doesn't, they want to tie it to something at least, for sure with the children's books. Once you get older and you go to novels for teenagers and up, that falls away. What about a book that doesn't teach? And we spoke before about the sublime messaging. Is there any? Is it good? Is it not good? Does it not matter? Is there any point to such a book?
well, I think, oh, I wrote one book that doesn't have a message. only one book, because I'm a very big message person. The only book I wrote is called Sat on a Hat, and it's a book to teach beginning reading. So it's just a really funny book, and with the most basic levels, and children memorize it right away, and that's how they learn to read. So I couldn't believe I actually wrote a book with no message because that's not my style. But
Right.
but my grandchildren, I had grandchildren living in Lakewood, and they were bringing home sheets to read about pigs and ham, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. This makes no sense. They could be reading really from beginning readers. So that's what I did. Sat on a Hat. It's a very funny book, and children love memorizing it. Yeah.
So you're saying there is a point as long as the sublime messaging is okay, because it helps their literacy, helps them read. And if
Right.
it's fun and funny, then they'll want to do it, and that will be good
Yes.
for them.
Yes, you
So,
could.
how important is reading for young children's growth?
Oh, reading is just such a joy. I mean, I truth is, picture books are still my favorite books.
That's
I don't
good.
know if you know my background, but I went to Harvard. I wasn't from growing up, and I went to Harvard, and you had to read all this material. I never did. I was able to get to the main point because that's my gift. I can zero in and distill out the main point. So I would read the beginning of the book, the end of the book, a little part in the middle, and I'd be able to write my papers, you know? So
Wow.
that's really how I do things. I love to get to the core of what it's about. So still today, picture books are my favorite books because they say things simply and clearly and joyfully. So I feel that it's so helpful to have books for young children. My children have books laying around like on their couch, tons of books. So whenever a child has a free moment, they pick up and read more books. They and they keep rotating the books. You know, my like a daughter will put out new books from the shelves, and so there are always new books to look at. She does this just on a periodic basis.
Well, she
Children,
probably
yeah,
has a lot of books to put out because she has
yes,
all of the
yeah,
bubbies are there.
yeah.
So let me ask you, you mentioned your background. Were you a big reader? I mean, you said you used to skip the parts, but books that you and that was on a paper in Harvard. But what about a book that you would enjoy reading? Like, did you read a lot of books, and what type of books did you enjoy
Well, that's the thing,
as a youngster?
right? I was not. I did read a lot as a child. Like Charlotte's Web, Stuart Little. Those were books that I loved. And one of the most important books that changed my life was The Diary of Anne Frank. At that point, I started my own diary, and I really took off in writing after being inspired by that book.
Wow.
Um, yeah, but yeah, in fact, also I have a memoir. The only book I wrote for adults is a memoir, which is actual excerpts from my diaries and journals through the years of how I became frum.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, so I'm not a big reader now either, though, because when I
Mhm.
read, my mind goes off into new ideas, and it takes me so long to ever finish a book, and then I can't pay attention to my children or grandchildren. So I really try not to get into novels and things like that, or I wouldn't be spending time with everybody on Shabbos. And so I'm not a tremendous reader, and I never was. I really like things that are said in a simple way, like I said, like with picture books. That's
Like the books
still,
that you write.
yeah, yeah,
Wow. Wow, that's right. You know, I'm the opposite. I was a very big reader. I just don't have much time. You know, now
right.
things are different, but I was always a very big reader, and I would read like anything. And I love kids'
Wow.
books and adult books. And if I'd even be sitting and eating by myself, and there's like a paper on the table, anything, and I would just read. You know,
Wow.
that
Also, I want to mention that before I was from, I was studying to become a doctor, and actually a psychiatrist. When I graduated from Harvard, I went to medical school, and
Hmm.
it was only that the first summer after my first year of medical school, I went to Israel that summer, and I became frum, and my whole life changed. So
Wow.
yeah, so. When I was at Harvard, even as an undergraduate, I was taking courses at Harvard's Graduate School of Public Health and at Harvard Medical School. So I've always been interested in science and public health. So you'll see that that's why many of my books are on those kind of subjects.
Right.
And
Hashem's candy store.
yes, that too. Exactly. I put a lot of psychology because that was my field. I majored in
Mhm.
psychology, and I have a love for public health. So a lot of my books are explaining um, these really basic things about how to have good health and how to be safe to
Right.
children. Yeah.
Right. That's amazing. But going back to what you said before about, the kids have books and they're sitting around on the couch. I've noticed something interesting. Let's say you would want to give your kids downtime before bedtime.
Yes.
When you have kids that are wired, like they're always moving, bedtime
Yes.
can take very long. And
Yes.
the body sort of needs to relax. I mean,
Yes.
it needs to calm down. The actual body needs to relax. Practically the only thing that I've seen that can do that before bedtime is reading a book, maybe looking at
Yes.
pictures. But
Yes.
it's practically the only thing. And somebody asked, um, some kids it's the opposite. Like they'll read a book at night in bed, and instead of helping them fall asleep, it will keep them up for much
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah.
Why is that? I mean, where would those differences play out? Why is it that it works very much as a relaxant, and also sometimes it doesn't?
Again, the parent has to have clarity about it. This is what I would do. It was called special time. The children couldn't wait. This sounds hysterical, but they really were excited about going to sleep. They were going to have special time with me, and that would mean reading a story or talking with them, and they would discuss about the things they were grateful for that happened that day, and they really look forward to that one-on-one time. So I think that's a really important thing to help calm children down. If they're reading on their own, that's a whole different story. Because again, it was that interaction. They were so happy to have that special time alone with me right before bed. And that was a very calming and loving experience that they look forward to doing. If they're doing it by themselves, I mean, they could stay up for hours and hours just reading. So that doesn't work so well. Yeah.
Right. But even reading on their own, there are a lot of times children who they'll sit down, they'll read a book on the couch, and it gets them into a different mode before going to
Yes.
sleep. Not talking about in bed, even
Yes.
before going to sleep. Then you'll
Yes.
have a teenager with a novel, a 500-page novel,
Yes.
and they're staying up a whole night. So
Exactly.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
What you said is right. The age of the child is what's so important there, when they could just stay up late at night. In fact, right in this book, that's what's going on here. On the first page, she's trying to stay up and read with a little flashlight under
Under
the
the
blanket.
blanket, right,
Yes.
right. If I would have to pick one subject that I would feel is crucial for a child to learn in school, it would be reading. And I'll explain to you what
Yes.
spelling. Um, I know somebody who told I mean, they're all important, but spelling, I know someone who told his kid, just learn how to spell well enough that spell check can figure out what you're trying to say.
Yes.
And then math, they're like, okay, can you at least know how to do the example on a calculator? Right. So there's a lot of, or just marry someone with a good math head, and you'll figure out the prices in the grocery. There's a lot of things that we really, especially nowadays in the digital world, we really, really get around. And we'll be okay as an
Yes.
adult. There are good things to learn, but we'll be okay as an adult. But I had a kid I was working with once who was in fifth, sixth, seventh grade, was not able to read on a first, second grade level,
Right.
and he was embarrassed because he
Right.
would be walking down the street with his friends,
Yes.
and there would be a street sign, there would be a sign up about something, and he couldn't figure out what was going on. So
Right.
to me, like the most important thing was always learning how to. If you have a kid that's struggling, the one subject that's like most important is being able to read. Do you
Absolutely.
feel when you sit on the couch with your kids and you're reading to them, and they don't really know how to read yet, but they're looking at the book with you and they're seeing the words and they're seeing the pictures and they're like sort of getting that association, does that help them to be able to read later on in life?
For sure, because they are motivated. They want to be able to read those books that you're reading to them. And I've had children with dyslexia, in my own family, so I totally relate to this. And even though I'm an author, at first they couldn't read my books because they were struggling. But
That's how.
yeah, eventually, thank God, they enjoy the books. But yeah, it definitely helps children because the more you can make it a joyful experience, especially for children with dyslexia, the better. So so bring in those books because the more exposure the children have, the better. Yes.
And would that, help also, let's say, Hebrew and English, let's say they're living in America and they always talk in English, and then they're going to school, they want to start, the parent feels it would be better to understand the Chumash better or whatever, if they would actually understand Lashon Kodesh, let's say.
Yes.
So would it make sense to read them a book in Lashon Kodesh? They're looking at the pictures, they're still getting it somewhat, and over time, would that help them with, to be more familiar with the language?
Yes, for sure. And I think that's why, we now have Haggadahs from Art Scroll with beautiful illustrations. All of this helps um, children to love it more and more. Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
On that, parents had an interesting question where they're sometimes reading their child a book, and I'm going to guess, let's say there's a word in that book, and they feel it's a little bit over their level, and they don't understand it. So they want to flip the word, right? Instead of saying it's incumbent on you, they're going to say you have to, right? For an example.
Right.
So, but we're talking about the child actually getting more familiar, and they're making associations with what they're hearing, with what they're seeing. So, will that mess it up?
No, I think it's totally fine. You want to communicate with a child on their level. That's what's essential. In my books, I try to use the simplest words possible. There's
Yeah, I
no
never
reason.
understood why an author for a young child's book will use a word that a young child won't know.
Yeah, doesn't make sense to me. Really basic words. That's the way I talk too. Again, I went to Harvard, but I never acted like this big intellectual. I love the simplicity. That to me is what it's about, getting simple ideas across in a joyful way. And to me, I want to say that to me, one of the most important things to teach children this skill early on in life are happiness skills. It's the most important skill that they're going to need throughout their lives. Not I don't want to say the most, but it's a very, very important skill. Implanting gratitude in children early on completely transforms the rest of their lives.
For
Yeah.
sure. Okay, let's say we have a young parent that heard this episode. They are sold. They never had a book in their house. Now they're going to the bookstore. They are buying the place out. How can they know which books are right for their child's age? They don't want to
Hmm.
go too high. They don't want to go too low. How can they figure that out?
That's a great question. Like I write board books for children aged 0 to age 3. Board books you can share with a child who's a month old. Seriously, because these books have pictures of babies on them, and the babies love seeing other babies' faces. I had read a secular book. I was reading a secular book from the library to my granddaughter, and I said, oh my goodness, there should be a Jewish book like this where the child sees basic things in their lives, puts words to it, but they're looking at the world through Jewish eyes from the beginning of life. So that's my What Do You See series. What do you see
Well,
at
you have a
home?
lot
What do
of
you
them.
see at school? Yeah. What do you
Yeah.
see on Shabbos? And children feel so empowered by these books. Plus, they see the photographs. These are not illustrated with pictures. These are illustrated with actual photographs and actual objects that the little tiny children can relate to, again implanting gratitude early on. Look at this amazing world that you're in, and you
So,
can name all these things.
right.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. How does a parent know when they walk into the bookstore that your board book is for the age 0 to 3? Or if they have a 7-year-old, how are they able to figure out which book is the right age? Do you write on the books? The
Uh,
authors usually write on the book what age level it's for? Or is there a way that we can sort of, like a certain way that we can sort of figure that out?
right, great question. Board books in general are for ages like 1 month to 3 years old,
Mhm.
because they are made out of heavy cardboard that are very hard to destruct, and that as the children go through it and bite on it or try to rip it apart, it's not easy to do. So that's for
Okay.
that age group. And then the other books I write are the picture books. So those are from, let's say, beginning at age 3 to like 7, but
Hmm.
the messages can still be read and absorbed and enjoyed by older children, but
Hmm.
it's not geared to that age level. It's geared to like 3 to 7. By 7, children are already reading, many children are already reading chapter books. So then you can move on to easy chapter books and more extensive novels for children. Those books I don't write, but that's basically how you gear it based
That's the
on the
hierarchy.
reading level. Yes.
Amazing. That's amazing information. I think it's going to be very useful to a lot of parents. Is there any last thing that you want to share with us? A message that you want all of our parents, our listeners, to take away from this conversation?
Um, I want to say that children are able to understand much very deep and spiritual concepts. We don't need to think that they can't, because their neshamas are really pure and they can absorb really deep messages. I want to just share one other book. It's called Don't Read This Book. This book is explaining how to overpower the Yetzer Hara. You can actually learn the tricks of the Yetzer Hara as a young child so that you can be empowered to overcome it. The book
Oh, wow.
explains, yeah, the book explains that the Yetzer Hara is always trying to make you miserable. Once you recognize you're feeling miserable, you go, oh, yeah, it's you, Yetzer Hara, trying to do that. You're trying to get me to focus on what I don't have, what I'm missing. So, what do you do to combat that? You can teach this to really young children and they get it. You can focus on what you already have. When you notice the Yetzer Hara making you miserable about what you don't have, oh, if I just had that, I'd be happy. That's what the Yetzer Hara does to children and it does to adults all day long. But if we learn about this as a young child, oh my gosh, then you're empowered your whole life. Then you have the skills and the tools to overpower it with gratitude, focusing on all the blessings in your life, the abundance of things that you already have. We all need more gratitude in our lives, and that's my mission, to really help to fill so many homes with more and more gratitude.
Yeah, the passion really comes through, and no, and that's amazing. I really think this is going to be very beneficial for everyone listening. Thank you so much for coming on again. It was an honor to have you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Parenting Not What You Thought podcast. I truly hope that this episode has been beneficial for you in your parenting. Please let me know either in the comments or by sending me an email at boruch, that's BORUCH, at bmaparenting.com. Have a wonderful day